So it is exactly 6:30 and we will begin. Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Are we letting more people in? Okay. Well, again, good evening, everyone, and thank you for attending this awareness webinar this evening. We hope to provide you with information and hopefully equip you with information and resources that we may do our part and join in the fight against human trafficking. We are very cognizant of your time on this Friday night, so we will begin. I am Rashawn Smith, and I am the second vice president of the Gamma Psi Zeta chapter of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated. And we are located in Temple, Texas. We will begin our webinar this evening with recognizing our founders of this great organization, which we affectionately call our Five Pearls. Without them, this community conscious, action oriented organization would not exist. And the work that we're charged to do in the communities, transforming lives, would not be possible. In the absence of our leadership, we acknowledge our 26th International President and CEO, Dr. Stacy N.C. Grant, our Regional Director, Retta M. McCoy, and our State Director, Latanya M. Logan. Present with us today, we do have our chapter president, Kimberly Childs. We believe it is essential for the community to understand, identify, and to be able to effectively respond to human trafficking. So today we have presenting to us for educational purposes a human trafficking webinar. Human trafficking is not just happening worlds away or across the borders, but right here in the communities in which we live. Miss Bronda.Hayes, who is with Unbound Now Waco, in her organization, are doing amazing work in their aim to fight for the protections of the vulnerable, identify the exploited, and advocate for survivors on their path to restoration. Ms. Bronda.Hayes, a proud Waco native, has dedicated her career and volunteer efforts to making a meaningful and impactful in her community. Currently serving as the Central Texas Assistant Regional Director for Unbound Now, Rhonda plays a pivotal role in combating human trafficking and supporting survivors across the region. She brings a strong background in healthcare to her role, which has provided her with a solid foundation for addressing complex issues and leading teams effectively. Rhonda's journey with Unbound began as a dedicated volunteer and a position she has held for several years before transitioning to staff role 2 years ago. Her deep passion for service extends far beyond her professional life. Rhonda is actively involved in her community, serving on multiple boards and holding key leadership positions in organizations that aim to empower and uplift others. Her commitment to creating positive change is evident in every aspect of her work. In May, Rhonda will achieve a historic milestone by becoming the first Black president of the Junior League of Waco, a testament to her trailblazing leadership and dedication to promoting inclusivity and progress. As a leader, Rhonda is known for her vision, collaborative spirit, and unwavering commitment to building a stronger, more equitable community. We welcome Ms. Bronda Hayes. Thank you, Bronda.
Thank you all for having me. I'm so excited to be able to present to you all tonight. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and then we'll get started on the webinar and then we will have questions at the end. So if you'll hold your questions or put them in the chat and then because sometimes if I don't write things down, I will forget as well. So just go ahead and put your questions in chat or just hang on to them until the end of the presentation. Now I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Can everyone see my screen? Yes. Alrighty. So again, I'm the Assistant Regional Director for Central Texas for Unbound Now. Unbound Now started in Waco in March, will be 13 years ago. And so it started with our founder, Susan Peters. She was on the mission field. She was noticing what was going on there in brothels and that sort of thing. And she thought, oh, we got to do something about this work. So she brought it back to the church and they started a ministry, but they thought they would be doing it overseas until she realized it was actually happening right here in our city. She would copy ads from the papers of people being advertised and being sold for sex. And so she would take those to the sheriff's office and tell them, hey, this is happening. There are people being trafficked. And they were like, it's not happening. So this went on where she's like, here's more ads. I keep seeing this until they encountered a young lady and they realized she was being trafficked and they did not know how to handle that. So they said, call the church ladies. So from there, that's kind of how we birthed, and we were a ministry of the church. Now we are our own 501c3. So we're our own entity. And so in this 13 years, we are now serving 46 counties in Texas. We have offices in Waco, North Texas, Bryan College Station, Houston, North Texas, and now in East Texas. We serve 10 parishes in Louisiana, and then we have 2 locations overseas, Mongolia and Poland. And so we have grown a lot and we are still continuing to grow. We receive some funding from the government and they have been adding more counties to us as we are growing. So the way that we do our work, we serve survivors of human trafficking and resource the communities to fight human trafficking. And the way that we do that is through our 3 lanes of effort. And that's our youth prevention program. So we are working with youth. We are in schools. We are doing assembly style trainings. We are doing small groups in schools, and we have a curriculum that we use for that. We are in the juvenile detention centers. We are in group homes, and we are trying to get in front of as many youth as we can to be able to swim upstream and stop this before it's happening to our kids, because we're seeing it happen more and more to youth. And we also have an early intervention specialist. She works one-on-one with girls who are high risk or really vulnerable to trafficking. And so she's working with them one-on-one. She's creating safety plans. She's working on an eco map. So looking for the healthy relationships in their lives. They're setting goals for their life to help them kind of shift the trajectory of their lives. A lot of her referrals come from the juvenile detention center. The judge here in Waco put it in their probation. They can't get off probation until they go through her program. And so we also have our outreach and training. And we do trainings like this where we're training professionals. We are training community members. We work with, we're training hotel staff, medical staff, making sure they have materials, make sure they know how to report. We also have our Heart of Texas Human Trafficking Coalition, and that's underneath our outreach and training. So we're working together with people who serve victims. So other nonprofits who serve victims. We are working with law enforcement. We're working with prosecutors and other attorneys, immigration attorneys, to help kind of bridge the gaps and make sure we are um, able to see where we can do better. We want to find the holes and like, where do we miss the mark this time? How can we serve this person better? And just recently, we had a meeting where we were in our meeting with law enforcement in the DA's office, and we had an investigator from DFPS, and he said they've been looking for this girl for several weeks. It's been about 21 days, and he kind of talked about her a little bit and just said where they've been looking, where she disappeared from. And one of the other law enforcement agencies said, wait, I think we've encountered this young lady. Well, they got together, they started working, and they found her in 3 days. She was able to come to our office. She actually stayed at our office overnight and with our advocates. And so they were able to get her into a placement, a rehab, and get her clean. And so, or she's working on getting clean. And then she's going to get into a placement long term to help her heal from that trauma. And then we have our survivor services, and that's where we have advocates who are working one-on-one with survivors and victims of trafficking. And they are in the trenches every day. They are working with their clients to help get their lives back. They are helping them, or they're supporting them to make sure that they're establishing medical care. They're helping them find jobs, get their kids back. If they want to get their GED, go to college, anything to help them get their voice. And they're really making sure their basic needs are met, making sure that, because that's what makes people really vulnerable, is those basic needs like food, clothing, shelter not being met. So they want to make sure those basic needs are met, and that helps them to be in, that they're stable, and that way they're able to move on to setting goals and getting their life back. They're sitting in court with them when they have to face their trafficker, and they're on call 24/7. So that's if law enforcement needs an assist, if they recovered someone, hospitals call, if clients call, they're making sure that they're there and they show up when they need them. Also under Survivor Services, we have the Underground, which is a drop-in center for homeless youth in North Texas. And here in Waco, we have the Reagan House, which is our home for girls who've been exploited or trafficked, ages 12 to 17. So they can live there long term, up to a year or longer, and they're getting their education back on track. So they're going to school, they are working through the program, but it's helping them learn coping skills. It's helping them learn life skills, and they're going to therapy. They're playing sports. They're being kids because so much of their childhood has been taken from them because of what's happened to them. And so that's one of my favorite things is the Reagan. So getting to go down and spend time with the girls and just get to know them and love on them, and they really are fun. Some days it's really tense in the house because we have a bunch of teenagers in a house, and they also are teenagers with complex trauma. So along with that complex trauma comes different behaviors and the way that they're triggered if something happens or if they've gotten bad news, not knowing how to cope. So, but we always celebrate those little wins. So if they didn't punch a hole in the wall this time when they got mad, they just cursed all the way down the hall and went to their room and slammed the door. That's a win. So, but we love those girls, and we just want them to get the best chance at life before their transition and their, living a life on their own later down the road. So human trafficking happens everywhere. It's a worldwide problem. That's why we're also working overseas. Over 50 million people are being trafficked worldwide. In Texas, every year, over 300,000 people are reporting being trafficked or being reported as trafficked, and 79,000 of those are our minors. Those are our kids, so people under the age of 18. and it's a $150 billion industry, and it keeps growing because they can sell people over and over again. They don't have to, um, like guns and drugs. They don't have to buy more. They don't have to replenish their um, what they're selling because it's a person. And we've had people tell us they've been sold over 20 or 30 times a day, if you can even wrap your mind around how that works. So, because it's happening so much, because um, we're seeing it grow in our community so much more, we're really trying to get in front of it before it happens to our youth. And a lot of it is happening online for our youth. That's where they're initially being contacted by a trafficker. And we'll get a little bit into that a little bit down in the presentation. So there's a law to protect victims of trafficking. It's called the Human Trafficking Victims Protection Act, the Trafficking Victims Protection Act. So that is to protect the victims so that they are not treated as criminals. And then that's also to criminalize the actual criminals, which is the recruiters, the traffickers, and the buyers. So that's a lot of words. And this is a federal law. So there always has to be an action, a means, and a purpose. So there has to be an action word. So recruiting, harboring, transporting, obtaining, providing, soliciting, advertising, any of those for the means by force, fraud, or coercion for the purpose of commercial sexual exploitation or forced labor. Now, for people under the age of 18, you don't have to prove force, fraud, or coercion because it's automatically a crime because they cannot consent. No matter how much they tell you, I know what I'm doing, I want to do this, they cannot consent. There are three types of trafficking: labor trafficking, sex trafficking, and child sex trafficking. Labor trafficking is when someone is forced, lied to, threatened, or coerced to provide labor or services. So that could look like restaurants, that could be housekeeping, that could be um, any construction. Anytime a person is manipulated or forced into providing services, labor services, it could be sex trafficking if they're being manipulated. I don't know if you all remember a few years back here in Waco, there was a buffet that was closed down or raided, and that was labor trafficking. So basically, what happened was they brought the people here and they promised them this American dream. They promised them that they would help them get their citizenship and they would be able to have money to send back to their families. Well, they got here, they had them living in these small apartments, so many people, overcrowded, small apartments. They would pick them up every day, take them to the restaurant to work, take them from the restaurant to work, back to that small apartment that they had them living in. And so, after this was over, once we worked with those people who were recovered, um, they asked the lady, they said, "Why did you never say anything? You know, if you knew it was wrong." She said, "I knew it was wrong. I knew it was wrong because they wouldn't help me get my citizenship. They took their passports, they took their visas, and they would not give them back to them. But they also kept telling them." And so they didn't know the labor laws. They were here and they don't know our labor laws. They don't know the process of getting citizenship. So they were going on what the people told them. And they basically, she said, "I didn't know, I couldn't say anything because I didn't have my papers. But they kept telling me I owed a debt. I had this debt that I hadn't paid off for them bringing me here and for giving me a place to stay and giving me clothes." So she said, and I had to protect my family back home because that was her way of taking care of her family back home. But also they were threatening her that they would do something to her family back home. So sex trafficking is when someone's forced, lied to, threatened, or coerced into performing sexual services in exchange for something of value. Now, that something of value doesn't always have to be an exchange of money. It could be for a place to live. It could be for food. It could be for material things. Whatever that something of value is for that person, and it looks different for everyone. It could be for drugs. I mean, it could be for just to protect a family member. It could be for rent money. Traffickers look for vulnerabilities and they use them against that person. Um, and that is how a lot of people are um, forced into trafficking, is they have a vulnerability. It could be just an unmet need or a desire just to be loved and to be taken care of or to be looked after. So, child sex trafficking is when someone under the age of 18 is involved in the commercial sex industry. Like I said, they don't have to prove force, fraud, or coercion with children because it's automatically a crime against a child. So, why do you need to know? Because you all are key community members. Anyone in the community needs to be aware. We want to make sure we're training as many people as we can, because everyone needs to know, everyone needs to be aware that this is happening right in our backyard. It's not an over there problem. It's happening right here in our towns, in our counties. And we know it because we're serving those people, we're getting those calls. And so we want people to be aware, not out of a place of making people fearful, but just for awareness and to protect each other and to protect our communities. So it's happening here in Texas. Texas is number 2 on the national hotline for trafficking reports. And our highway system makes it so easy for people to be trafficked and to be moved around. And plus, Texas is a large state. I mean, you can get anywhere to any major city from Waco or from even Bell County in an hour and a half. It doesn't take long. So traffickers move their victims around. They take them to different cities to traffic them. And I mean, even with kids, they'll pick them up on a Friday afternoon at the end of the school. They'll traffic them all weekend, drop them right back off on Monday morning. And so it's our highway system that makes it so easy and so accessible for them to move people around. And luckily, some of them, when they have charges, they have them in multiple counties, so then they get multiple life sentences for um, when they've trafficked someone or multiple people. And it happens right here in our communities. Unbound Now as a whole, in 2024, we served over 1,600 individuals. And the year before, we had only served 800. It was like 823, I believe. I might be off of that number, but I know it was over 800. And this year, the number in 2024, I'm sorry, the number doubled and we served over 1,600 people. Waco answered over 500 calls on our crisis response line. And we served about 150 people in Waco in 2024. And that number also doubled from when, and our Waco office actually covers Bell County too. So we have 2 advocates that are assigned to Bell County, but they are part of the Waco office. And so they live there. We wanted people who live in that community, who know the community, to be the advocates there. So we hired people in those communities. And so, but they are our staff here in Waco as well. So who's involved? It's the victims, and then the traffickers, the recruiters, and the buyers. Who's the victim? A victim can be anyone. They don't look a certain way. They don't come from a certain family. Anyone, any financial status, any ethnicity, anyone can be a victim of trafficking. We've had people where it started online. We've had where someone comes and they're watching our kids online. They're watching what they're doing. They're watching who they're hanging out with, and they use that vulnerability of them wanting to be seen, wanting to be heard. And if we always tell our youth, if you are on there and someone asks you to send a picture of yourself or to do something on a camera, and you send it, and they send it to other people or they sell it, and then they're blackmailing you to send more or to do more explicit things, you've just been exploited and you never even left your house. And that's why, with this population of youth who have been victimized online, exploitation, there's a higher rate of suicide for the people who are being exploited like that. I had a young lady come up to me after a training at a middle school, and she said she had posted a TikTok video, and she said this super old guy came in my inbox and he was telling me I was pretty. He wanted to get to know me. He wanted to meet me. And I was like, what did you do? She said, I told my dad. And I was like, great. What did your dad do? So she said, her dad blocked the guy. And I was like, well, good. Thank you for trusting your dad, because a lot of kids won't go to their parents and tell them this is happening. So she said, but when my dad blocked him, he made another profile and he came in my inbox again and said, hey, I couldn't reach you. I had to create a whole new profile to be able to contact you. What happened? I want to meet you. You're so pretty. And I said, what did you do? She said her dad was already gone to work. She saw it that morning. And so I said, let's call your dad. So I called her dad, connected him with the sheriff's office here in McLennan County, because they do, their human trafficking division does online stings as well. So I connected them so that he could see who this was that was um, trying to made his daughter. And so that is something we talk about a lot in schools with the youth, is online safety, because they don't know. I mean, they're just not thinking about that. They don't think that this is a predator on the other end of this. We've had it where they've sent pictures like that they're a 14 or 15-year-old guy sending them to a girl, and they're sending pictures to each other, and then they go to meet and it's like a 50-year-old guy. And that is it makes me sick on so many levels. So anyone, no matter who they are, could be a victim of trafficking. And it also happens to boys. There's a common misconception that it doesn't happen to boys, but it happens to boys just as often. They don't always self-report. And even just in the last few years, there weren't as many services for boys as there have been for girls and women, because they always thought that this was a female problem, not a male problem. But we have been seeing the number increase for male victims as well. And so there's more services available. They're learning how to serve them well too, and not just services being geared towards girls, just to make sure that they also get the help and the services that they need. So with labor trafficking, some things to look for is sometimes they're not free to come and go on their own, like the buffet raid. There was a person who lived in the neighborhood behind the restaurant, and they walked in the evenings. They walked in the mornings sometimes too. So they would always see these people getting dropped off at the restaurant. Sometimes they'd be driving by, they see him getting picked up in the van. And so they just said, this looks weird. And they called and said something. And so law enforcement started watching it. And then sure enough, they were trafficking those people. So they weren't free to come and go on their own. They couldn't just go into Target or go into get their groceries or anything like that. They had to, someone was taking them everywhere that they went. They don't always have possession of their IDs or money or their documentation. They work excessively long or usual hours. Like the lady said, she had this unpayable debt that she could never just pay down to be able to get her citizenship, or so she thought. They're recruited under false promises, and they lack basic needs or medical care. We when we're doing trainings and providing information for medical staff, a lot of times the urgent cares and the ERs is where they will identify people. It's very rare that they'll take them to, of course, a medical doctor or a family practice doctor. So it's usually the ERs and urgent cares where they can take them really quick, and because they're used to having people come, just random people. So we do a lot of training for that staff, because they don't always have those basic medical needs met. Sometimes they show signs of violence or assault, and then they don't know exactly where they are. They may know that they're in Texas, but they may not know what city. They may know they're in America, but they don't know what state they're in. So because there's a language barrier, they don't always know exactly where they are. So for sex trafficking, sometimes hiding bruises and scars, tattoos, they kind of brand their victims and their property, frequent movement or unstable housing. That is why youth and even people who um, they live on the streets or they're couch surfing or they have just moving a lot, they are so vulnerable for trafficking because with this Texas weather, if the weather can change in a heartbeat. So if someone's offering you in a warm bed and they're like, if you just do these things, I'll let you stay in this hotel for a week. Or we really work a lot with the youth who come to JDC who've run away, trying to help them learn, how to stay safe, and they know what numbers to call. But then we also, there's a population I think people don't think about are the kids who are tossed out, like who are kicked out of their homes, who they've had a falling out with their parents and they're kicked out. And so usually with kids who run away, they have a plan on where they may go or where they could go. But sometimes kids who've been kicked out and everything's kind of been taken away from them, they don't have a plan. And so they're really vulnerable to this. Involvement in commercial sex industry, being controlled or manipulated by another person. We always tell medical staff, even just people, service providers, people in the community, watch if someone's not answering for themselves. Excuse me, I'm going to take a drink. Sorry. That they're not speaking for themselves, they won't answer for themselves, and just pay attention to those things. Excuse me. And child sex trafficking, sometimes we do a lot of trainings with school staff as well. We're trying to get back in the schools and do more trainings, and COVID kind of derailed that, but we are getting more requests from schools now. And so kids who skip school, they're running away, they're traveling a lot, but not with like their families, hanging out with different groups, dressing differently, spending time with someone much older than them. There's no reason for like a 14-year-old girl to be hanging out with like a 50-year-old man or anyone older than her that's not in her age range, who she should be dating. Um, Being disruptive, if they're losing interest and not doing extracurricular activities, if they are just not themselves, we always tell them, please use your spidey sense. Listen to, watch these kids. They're with you more in school than they are even at home. So pay attention to those things and ask questions if they'll talk to you, or just make a report, mention it in, to like a counselor or something, because we'd rather them say something and nothing was wrong than to not say something and something happens to that kid. Excuse me, I'm so sorry. I don't know where this came from. So, barriers to identification. So, a lot of times people won't self report, they won't say, I'm being trafficked, because a lot of times they don't know that they're being trafficked. They don't understand, they don't know what trafficking is. If you ask someone, are you being trafficked? They're going to say no because they don't believe that they're being trafficked. Um, they don't think anyone will believe them. They don't think anyone will believe that that I'm letting this happen to me or I'm doing this. Um, Fear of retaliation, so they're being threatened. Fear of being placed in foster care. There are quite a few kids that we're encountering who were trafficked by their parents. And then they don't want to get that family member in trouble. Kids are always going to be loyal to their family of origin and the people who raised them, no matter how chaotic, no matter how much we don't understand how they would protect this person. They're always going to be loyal to their family. And but it's becoming more and more that we're seeing people in desperate situations and they are using their kids and selling their kids um, for money, for rent, for drugs, for anything. So um, they won't always self-report because they don't want to leave their home. Stockholm syndrome or trauma bonding, that's when someone thinks that that person loves them, they're the only person there for them, um, and that nobody else cares for them or loves them. They, a lot of times, traffickers isolate victims from the people who really do care about them. They are, it's really isolating for, and so when they are recovered and when they start working with our advocates, it's, they don't always have they don't usually have a support system. So our advocates are the people that they have. That's the person showing up when they have a baby or go graduate from school or have to go to court. That's who's showing up. And so because they've isolated themselves or the trafficker has isolated them from the other people in their community who did care about them. Confusion or disorientation. And like I said, they don't always understand what's happening. For those of you who were at the movie night last night, Pam talked about the girl who, um, she's in middle school and she did not know what trafficking was until she was sitting in one of our small groups and they were going over what is human trafficking. And she said, I think that's happening to me. And so they talked to the counselor. She went with her to the counselor and talked to her, and come to find out it was her mom's boyfriend who was trafficking her. And so they don't always know what's happening to them. Even after you explain what trafficking is, they don't believe that this could happen to me or this is happening to me. And a lot of times people just feel shame. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want to share what had, because they blame themselves a lot of times for what has happened to them. So, uh, what do you think of when you hear the word pimp? A pimp is the same thing as a trafficker. They try to make it seem glamorized and like it's this great thing. But a pimp and a trafficker, they seek out vulnerabilities in people, and they use them for their own financial gain. They're exact same. Recruiters are a lot of times they're victims as well. Sometimes they are or have been trafficked themselves or victimized in some way. So they know what vulnerabilities to look for. So they're the ones who are where kids are, where vulnerable people are. Um, and they know what to say. They know what to look for because they've been that person. They've been that vulnerable person and been taken advantage of. So recruiters are just as guilty as the traffickers, but they are also victims a lot of times themselves. They're not just, yeah, I'm gonna be a recruiter for a trafficker. They've usually been manipulated and been victimized themselves. So they have that bond with the trafficker, and then they're out bringing people into this as well for the trafficker. Traffickers and pimps, they both exploit people for money. They find their victims' vulnerabilities and use them against them. They lie, manipulate, force, or blackmail their victims. We always, it, we don't always go in and say that person doesn't love you and all that. I mean, they usually come to it on their own. It's like that person never cared about me. But there's always a piece of them, usually, that is still connected to that person because probably for quite a while, that was the person that provided for them. That was the person that was there for them when nobody else was. But that person did not care for them because they were using them to make money. So, 55% of people, their initial contact was online, on games, on social media. We did a training with the sheriff's office for Region 12, and they did in real time. He showed in real time just a normal chat room, not on the deep dark web, this normal chat room that he just put in the chat 15-year-old female bored. And it was mid morning. I mean, it was like 10 o'clock in the morning, and sent it. And within like 10 seconds, the inbox was lighting up, asking for pictures. Let's meet up. Send me, asking for naked pictures. And so that just shows that's not even like the deep, dark web that he was on. It was just a regular chat room. You can Google it. And um, it was, and they just were asking for those things right away. And so that's also, I mean, they've caught people, kind of jammed them up on there because they um, were, asking, they thought they were like a 13 or 14-year-old girl on there. So it's so easy for our kids to be, because they're on so many apps. There's new apps coming out every day, and they're always, and they put their whole lives on there. They know who their friends are. They know where they've been. They know everything about them, and they're watching it. Even if they're on private, they can still find a way to get in and ask them, let's be friends, let's meet up. And remember, I met you at that game, or I met you at that party. And um, so we always talk to kids about safety, and we're going to start really partnering with the sheriff's office, showing them in real time, like what happens, um, like in front of the kids, and not just the parents and the staff. So the kids are seeing how unsafe it is out there. Um, so some people do meet them face to face, but a lot of times that initial contact was on social media. So how do traffickers trap their victims? They look for those unmet needs and desires, and that could be material things, that could be a longing for friendship or love or anything like that. Anything that makes them vulnerable is an unmet need or desire. This slide here is some of the risk factors we've kind of talked about already. We see a lot of people in our Austin office. We've been encountering a lot of people who are undocumented that we're working with, and trying to make sure that they're getting their visas, they're getting their citizenship so that they can stay here. And so we've been working tirelessly, really hard with some immigration attorneys and stuff to help them. But these are some risk factors. I don't know if y'all want to take a picture of that, but I can email some of this information out as well. But runaways, homelessness, history of abuse or exploitation. Sometimes they've seen that happening. We always say that, when the girls come into the Reagan, we're like, why don't they want to be here? Why don't they love it here? It's because they're not used to that stable home life, having to do chores, having to go to school, you know, going to therapy, all these things. That's not normal to them. That doesn't feel normal. It feels normal to us, but it doesn't feel normal. It doesn't feel like they that's not, they're used to the chaos, they're used to the just not knowing, and so that just doesn't feel normal. So but all these other things feel normal. They really don't have a frame of reference for just a calm life that we deem normal, but it's not normal for them. And so we have to always understand that it's not, um, you can't get your feelings hurt because a girl hates it at the Reagan, because they might all hate it there. Um, so the recruitment methods, a lot of times there's a romantic situation. We call it befriending or boyfriending. They think that this person loves them, posing as a benefactor. So they're giving you all these material things, jobs or advertisement. We talk to the girls a lot about watching out for modeling jobs, or excuse me, do you want to be an influencer, that sort of thing, familial or related. Um, and abduction or forced kidnapping is the least way. We don't see that a lot here, but I'm not saying it doesn't happen, because it can. But we see more of that grooming process, because if you know someone, if you've built trust with them, it's easier to make them keep doing what you want them to do versus holding someone against their will. I don't know if some of you remember from the film last night, they talked about the invisible gun, and there's always something holding them there with this person. So that grooming process, that making them trust you, is the way that they a lot of times keep them there. And people always ask, excuse me, why don't victims just leave? And that's a hard question, because they a lot of times are connected to this person. A lot of times fear, they're afraid they'll do something to their families, they've threatened them, lies. Like, it's going to be better. I love you. That's why I make you do these things. We're going to make it big. Hopelessness, addiction, shame. They don't want to tell people what's happened to them. They don't want to they're embarrassed to tell people what's happened to them. They always say, people won't believe I'm doing this. We're like, that's something that happened to you. Someone is making you do this. I don't think anybody woke up and just decided that I'm going to be a prostitute. I'm going to traffic, sell myself. And so a lot of times I feel hopeless. They don't even, they've been so programmed to think that they're not worth anything, and that they um, don't have any worth, that they just feel hopeless. And we always, I try to explain it that people who have been trafficked have so much complex trauma. Because if you think about the trauma that a person who's been in a domestic violence situation, or who has been sexually assaulted or abused or neglected, and you think about the journey to healing for them, sometimes victims of trafficking have had all those things happen to them. And so it's so complex and it's so deep rooted a lot of times that it's so hard for them to even feel like they're worth it, or even have the will to keep fighting and to keep, and they don't always just come out, it's like, okay, I've been rescued, I've been recovered, I'm gonna um go on with my life. No, they sometimes go back. And we had a girl who's just like, I don't need y'all anymore. She didn't really want to work with the advocates anymore. I think she just didn't get a job, or there was a lot of things that was happening that just, they weren't going her way. She wasn't getting a lot of yeses. She wasn't getting a lot of wins. It was just an uphill battle. And so she just kind of ghosted her advocate. And so she's like, I can't keep doing this. You keep getting my hopes up. We keep thinking good things are going to happen, and they're not. And so she just stopped answering the calls, stopped meeting with her advocate. And she called a year later on our crisis response line and said she needed help. And so now she's been clean for like 3 months, and she's meeting with her advocate every week, and she's trying to get her life back. And so, but we don't close them out. I mean, we usually keep them open as long as they need us. So we don't always, because we want them to know that there's somebody they're in their corner. There's somebody who's going to keep showing up for you and keep supporting you. And so we always want them to also know that you can always call us when you need us. Even if they say, I don't need you anymore, they still know that they can call. We want our victims to know that there is a way out, that that there's more to life than what they're feeling in that moment. We always try to connect victims of trafficking that we're working with survivor leaders who are kind of on the other side of this thing, still healing, still every day walking out this journey, but have hit some milestones, that they're owning businesses. They are going, back to school. We have one young lady that we serve. She's interning with us. She's getting her master's in social work, and she's interning with us right now. So, and to see the girls at the Reagan connecting with her because she's a survivor, because she knows what they've been through. I mean, it's really sweet to see that she's really poured into these girls, because she's still healing every day, but she's still using that in a positive way. So we always make sure we connect them with survivors who are in a more healed place, so that they see that just keep pushing forward, and there's more out there to this. For youth, we always we are mandated reporters, and we do train a lot of people who are mandated reporters to report to the Texas Abuse Hotline. You can do it online, or you can call, because trafficking a child is a form of child abuse. So we always want to make sure that that is reported to the Texas Abuse Hotline. So if you did notice something and you called our crisis response line, we always will tell you to, you also have to report it to the Texas Abuse Hotline. We can't report it for a person because, and I don't know if there's any educators or anybody who works, who are service providers that knows they have to report it themselves, not secondhand. So, um, and then, okay. So this is a national trafficking hotline. The first number that you see there, the 1-888. You can access that anywhere in the country. We always want people to know if you're on vacation, if you're in, I don't know, Mexico, you're in Louisiana, anywhere, you can call that number and they will connect to local law enforcement if there's something you saw that might be trafficking. We never want people to put themselves in danger. If you see something that's um, like immediate danger, then call 911, call law enforcement, and so that they can protect that person. We never want anyone to put themselves in harm's way trying to protect someone or trying to save someone. The Unbound Now crisis response line, that number, our advocates answer 24/7. There's not a answering service or anything like that. They're always there. I always say if I do something stupid and I get tossed in jail, the only number I really know by heart is our crisis response number, and I always know someone's going to answer. So I will always call that number. But you can call that number if you, I don't know what everyone's jobs are, if you notice something that might feel off with someone, or you feel like you just want to ask some questions about it, they'll answer and they'll talk it through with you. Or if you want to report something, they'll tell you the steps to how to report, who to contact, and get you in contact with someone that you can report trafficking to. Our Unbound Now office, you can call that number anytime if you want more trainings, or if you have any questions, want to know about events or volunteering, or you can go to our website, unboundnow.org, and there's more trainings on there. We offer some CEUs for social workers and nurses, and I think pharmacists and dental and dentists. So we offer CEUs for that, and we have some on-demand trainings. Um, there are our references. And in April, we have our Light Up the Dark 5K coming up April 12th. It's a fun run. It is at Cameron Park Zoo, and everybody's wearing glow gear. It's in the evening. We have fun things for the kids to do. There's food trucks, all the things. So if y'all want to get together and come and do a 5K in April, we'd love to have you all. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen, and I can also send this information out if you all want it. And then if anyone has any questions, I'm ready to take those questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Bronda, for that wonderful, informative, educational information you provided to us. And we will check the chat if there are any questions in the chat.
I'm seeing no questions at this time.
Okay. If there are any questions from those in attendance, you can raise your hand and we will unmute you. So, Brenda, I do have a question for those that may want to view the Unleashed documentary, which was a very excellent documentary. How may they obtain or view that documentary?
So it's the film director. I don't think she's released that to like send to groups yet, but she's allowing us to set up viewings with groups if we need to. So if y'all wanted to do a movie night for Zeta Phi Beta, we're happy to come and do a viewing for you all. And we just can't send it out right now. So, but I'm happy to even set that up for a later date to do a viewing with you all. little viewing
Oh,
party.
excellent. Um, well, I learned and gleaned a lot from that documentary yesterday. Just observing, that was one thing. And we may not know people personally, but just getting that education so that we in turn can educate other people into just observing my and vision of take trafficking. Of course, everybody watched Taken, but that was my first, like, okay, it's that dramatic, but it is just literally right in our backyards. Children online a lot. Now my daughter's online a lot. I'm like, Maya, you don't communicate with people. So that's my um, experiences that I have a youth, and just learning, like you say, those apps every day. She's always talking, and I was like, I need to download it so that I'm aware of it. But just those educational opportunities for us, no matter how small or minute we may think that they are, but those are things that could just make the difference in us being keen and being aware.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, oh, hang on. I think there was a question.
Looking at
I see one question in the chat. Let's see. My eyes are watering. We have. It's not a question. It's just a observation.
Oh, here, I believe this
Oh,
is
yes,
for,
it is a question. I'm sorry. The question is, what is the best way to get a local contact to do an informational or guest speaker if outside of the Texas area? That's the first question. And then target group would be our undergrad population.
I can do a virtual. Can you say what area?
so Delane, you can't unmute yourself.
Alabama.
Alabama. We could probably do a virtual. We're happy to do that, a webinar. We don't have a location there. I don't know if there's any trafficking organizations there, but we can also do a virtual. We we only have offices in Texas, Louisiana, and overseas right now. So
Okay, sorry. I'm a little technologically handicapped, so I couldn't find unmute. But again, this is such a great presentation. When I was in Texas, they had a young lady who was a college student, and she was being trafficked, and her parents were visiting her on a regular basis. And she actually came and she talked to us, and her parents came, and she was in protective custody. But it was just really eye opening that, her parents were like, she was on the dean's list and she was making great grades, and we had no idea that our honor student was being trafficked by, her boyfriend, and he was trying to elicit her to get other college girls in. So I think it's those of us that deal with the undergrads, like, that I think this would be great for them. So I will definitely try to reach out to you and talk with our undergrad population to make sure they're aware of that for themselves and their college classmates.
yeah. And I mean, it hides in plain sight. So you never know if they just kind of carry it well, that they pretend like something's not happening and cover it up. But a lot of times there's something there. I mean, you may notice minor things, there might have been, like an off day or something that you missed, but that boyfriend, she probably thought he loved her. And so she just kept doing it out of wanting to keep him happy, I guess. So yeah, and we see that a lot.
Okay. If there are no more questions or comments, we will put Ms. Hayes' information in the chat. Sora Grant, I sent that to you. I don't know if you can drop that in the chat. But if you don't get that from the chat, you're more than welcome to reach out to any of our members or email our chapter email, and we will get that contact information to you. That information is placed in the chat if you would like to grab that. So we truly appreciate everyone's time today. And thank you, Bronda, for the presentation.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, good evening, everyone.